Okay. Welcome, regular Drews.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome to episode. This is episode 49?
It is
Okay.
indeed, yes.
I wrote that at the top of our document sheet, but I didn't believe it when I just read it. I was like, wait, really?
It is,
Yep.
yeah.
49. All right. Yeah, we're going to be talking about famous mistakes. Nancy Drew Diaries number 17.
Well, aren't you a regular Nancy Drew?
We sure hope so, and we hope you are too.
Join us as we talk Nancy Drew cover to cover and click to click.
Welcome to Regular Nancy Drew. Kori, what do you think about this one?
It was fine.
Yeah.
You can't expect every book to have a huge, exciting plot twist or something
Right.
unique about it, but there's just not a lot that stood out to me. It was just kind of meh. That was the book, There was just nothing great about it, I guess.
I totally agree. And it's super weird because I think that, reading this book, I definitely enjoyed it more than, a Nancy Drew Christmas. Because
Okay, good.
it was I was following, it was much more cogent. It was much more like, okay, A to B to C instead of A to Q, Q to T, T to
Plus a chainsaw.
D, F, all of that stuff. So I enjoyed it, but at the same time, it was like when I go back and cast back into the memory, it's like I barely remember this book. And I finished it last week. Whereas there are things from a Nancy Drew Christmas that I'm I will never forget. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's just so weird how that happens in my brain, how I can like a book more that is less memorable.
Okay, yeah, that's weird.
That is weird.
It makes sense, though.
I guess. But yeah, I thought it was fine. There was nothing, super offensive about it, but there was also nothing super great about it,
Yeah, exactly.
So, oh well.
I read this one, I think 1.5 times because I started it and then took a break from it for so long that I was like, I might as well just go back and restart it so I have a good idea of what's going on right before we record. So I finished it, Monday? And I'm like, what happened? I don't remember.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Also, we did kind of get a heist book like I asked for the last time.
A little bit.
But also, not. So, I just don't understand. Because we just have so many tropes of, really great mystery stories that just exist. And it doesn't seem like it would be hard. And who am I to say? I've never successfully written anything. So, I don't know. But, can't you just copy? Not copy, but, essentially get the building blocks of, a really good heist mystery or, a robbery or something and do that instead of this? Why does it always gotta be JD effing sabotage?
That would have been great.
I'm just so sick of it. Can we have Nancy Drew actually investigate the crime that the crime is about? You know what I mean?
Right.
Why does it always have to be some kind of fringe thing, which is not actually what's going on? And I understand how in mystery stories it's a common thing for us to oh, actually this. And that's fine. But every book? Every book.
Yeah. It's getting old.
I'm tired. I'm tired, Kori. I'm tired. Yeah. So, oh well. 3 words?
Not art heist.
Not art
heist. Should be. That's what the book should have been about. Nope. Podcast, I guess.
I want to say bros.
Yeah, definitely.
Bro. It's a bro-y book.
It's very bro-y.
Between
frat bro-y.
Yes. This comedian and then that guy, what's his name, Joe or something, and
See, I don't even
and
remember.
Carson and even Ned, and all of it's very like just broy.
Yeah.
And honestly, not in an offensive way. It's fine. It's just just gives me a little bit of the ick. But
Yeah.
so broy, not art heist.
Activism.
Yes.
There we go.
Definitely.
That would work.
Definitely. That's perfect. Yeah. Doesn't exactly, stack up to sound like a great read, does it?
No.
Can you imagine, though, a broy activist art heist? Imagine it was the opposite, like, of the not art heist, that it was an art heist. That would be amazing, wouldn't it?
I would read any heist book, so
I would
even
too.
with
I
the
would too.
broy, yeah. And if we want to talk about the cover, like,
Yeah.
this,
I know.
this never happens. We never get this scene. You look at this cover and expect art heist or, art museum mystery of something. It's just a scene of Nancy following what looks like, some tracks of footprints through a really dark hallway in an art museum, and she's got her flashlight out. She's clearly sneaking around after dark, after hours, but I mean, we might have sort of gotten a second of that where she just has to walk through there to get to where she's going, but it's not this.
To be fair, like, this is a scene from the book, but it's literally like 0.25 seconds of the book, like you were saying.
Right.
And like, it's so deceptive. It's so deceptive. What really it should have been is like Nancy sitting in a trashed hotel room. That's what it should have been. Or, I don't know, anything else. But so the cover is of Nancy, and there are the old masters on the wall and a bunch of different, paintings, and she's holding her flashlight in a very iconic way. I do like the flashlight hold.
Yeah, it is nice.
Shining out across, and on the floor there's like a bunch of footprints that she is presumably following. But yeah.
You would never guess the real plot just from looking at this cover.
You wouldn't. Be like, ooh, Nancy gets to sneak around a museum. It's like, for a page. She does that for a page of it. So it's just like they clearly know what we want, right? Because they put this on the cover. So they know what we want to see, but they won't put it in, like, they won't feature it in the book. You know what I mean? That's what's so annoying about it. It's like, it's a trick. It's a trick. Oh, wow.
If you guys have read any of the diary series and know of one that's not, just outright a sabotage case, let us know.
Please.
Let us know.
Please let us know. Yeah. Okay, well, do we want to go ahead and jump in then to our broy not art heist activism book?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. So we started this book with Ned and Nancy. They are prepping for an interview for Ned's podcast called Ned Talks. Ned.
Sorry.
No, I know. It's clearly a bastardization of TED Talks, but okay.
Again, with the names.
I know.
Yeah.
Bad names. They are about to go into the Towering Heights Resort, where Ned will be interviewing comedian Brady Owens. But Ned is super nervous about it because typically his podcast, he only has been able to interview local talent. And this is kind of like the first big name he has the opportunity to interview. So they're circling the block while they wait to go in, because Ned just has to, I guess, just walk off his anxiety. Brady is in town to perform at the recently opened art complex, and Carson, Nancy's dad, just happens to be this comedian's fraternity brother. So Ned asked Carson for an introduction to Brady while he was in town, and here we are. Ned's gonna interview him. He also mentions that he plans on asking Brady about a recent video that has gone viral of Brady's response to a heckler in his audience, because apparently Brady made a joke in a recent show about, like, mugging someone, and a woman in the audience, like, responded that, like, joking about violence isn't funny, to which Brady then says to the audience that he thought it would be funny if someone mugged this audience member, like, in the parking lot after the show. Yikes. So
Awful.
obviously, yeah, horrifying, horrible. There was a lot of backlash against him after this video came out, with people saying, that his comment is inciting violence against an audience member, which it is. But he has since doubled down, saying that, what he said was clearly a joke and that, comedians are supposed to offend people and this is all part of my job kind of thing. And you people have your panties in a twist kind of a sentiment. And so Ned is going to ask him about that. And this will be Brady's first interview since that video came out. So Ned kind of has like first opportunity to kind of, hear what he has to say about it. But Ned's nervous about it, right? But now it is time, so they head inside and go up to Brady's room. Once they're at the door, Ned reaches his hand out to knock, but the door is open. So they kind of call out, to try to like introduce themselves and, go in, but there's no answer. So they like push open the door and then they see that his entire room is trashed. There's clothes strewn everywhere, sheets are pulled off the bed, paintings have been pulled off the wall, and Brady is nowhere to be seen. Dun dun dun! Oh man.
Not a bad start.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm just kind of like, well, we know nothing bad's happened to him because, like, we've read the back of the book. So, like...
Right.
It's a little anticlimactic, but I guess whatever.
Of course.
So Ned tries to call him, like on his phone because he has his phone number, but he doesn't pick up. So Nancy goes ahead and takes a look around, of course, because it's Nancy Drew. What else is she going to do but start snooping? She's careful, though, not to disturb anything. She does see that his laptop is still there, so it doesn't look like theft was the motive, so people didn't come here to steal stuff. But she also doesn't see anything that would indicate that it was someone trying to sabotage Brady, because otherwise she thinks that there would be like something to show like why the victim had been targeted, like some kind of message like back off or, whatever. So she's worried that this could be a kidnapping, that's why the room is in shambles. Somebody has come in here and taken Brady. So they go downstairs to alert security. Nancy finds a man at the front desk named Pete, who apparently she has previously helped before. She's helped him find his dog and like stop a dog napping ring. It's very cute.
I wonder if that's a reference to a previous diary that we didn't.
I think it must be. Do you see the stolen show? That's actually on the back of this book. Mm-hmm. Oh no, that's the next one. Never mind.
So I don't think it would be
all the little Scotty dogs. Never mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, surely
there's another dog related.
Yeah. So she tells Pete about the trashed room and asks if they have security cameras, and he says, yeah, we do, but we only have them in the lobby. We had them in the hallways, but we got rid of them because, the guests felt like it was invading their privacy. But Pete does tell us that he saw Brady head into the hotel restaurant not long ago, so Nancy and Ned go to the hotel restaurant. And they pretty immediately see him at a corner table with this other guy that Nancy recognizes as Joe Archer, who is the director of the new River Heights Arts Complex. Apparently, Joe Archer is this huge deal. He previously worked at San Francisco at some, like, arts space thing, and he has now come home to his hometown of River Heights to work at a newly opened arts complex here. Also, is this supposed to be a reference to Jim Archer from Old Clock?
I couldn't tell. I mean,
I just thought it was so odd. Like, maybe they're trying to allude to this historic Archer family, but it just felt like, why wouldn't you just call him Jim Archer?
Maybe he is like a descendant of the Archer family. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, I just thought it was an interesting name choice.
If we were going to do that, I would have needed a Helen Corning reference as well, but...
Right, like his wife, Helen. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well.
Oh, well. But yeah, so they go over to them, and Ned introduces himself, and Brady apologizes. He says he lost track of time. He didn't hear the phone, so he didn't know that it was, time to record this podcast or whatever. And after Nancy introduces herself, Brady recognizes her as Carson's daughter, because apparently Carson like sends like Christmas updates of like the cases that Nancy has solved that year. So precious, so cute. And it's at this point that Nancy has to break to Brady that his room has been trashed. Both Brady and Joe seem shocked, but Brady kind of sighs and says that it must have had something to do with his tweet this morning. He thought he was giving the hotel good publicity because he tweeted, "Just checked into the amazing Towering Heights resorts," but he also tweeted a picture of himself that like clearly shows his room number. So someone must have seen his tweet, found his hotel room, and gone and trashed it. Which is just, I don't understand. How can you exist on the internet and just proudly proclaim your location as like a somewhat celebrity? Right. Are you an idiot?
Not even as a normal person.
No.
Why, especially if you have a following.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine. Anyway. So he asks them, "Did you see a little black book while you were upstairs?" And Nancy says, "No, she didn't." So he freaks out at this comment and they all race upstairs. In the elevator, Nancy asks him, "Okay, what is it? What about this black book? What is so important about this black book?" And he has like this flash of anger towards Nancy that causes Nancy to like physically step back from him. And he tells her that it's all his material is in that black book. It's his whole life. Okay, all right. What an ass.
All right.
The elevator is like taking too long, so they get out on a floor and start taking the stairs. But as they're like running down the hallway, something on a bulletin board catches Nancy's eye. It's a poster for Brady's show, and someone on it has scrawled "boycott" and the letters RHVRA. Nancy assumes that the RH stands for River Heights, and takes the poster. If someone is mad enough to write this on a poster, could they have been mad enough to trash Brady's room? That's her thought, right? So once Ned and Nancy catch back up to Brady and Joe, who had raced ahead to his room, they find Brady sitting dejectedly on his bed. Nancy asks, "Hey, is the book missing?" But Brady says, "No, it's worse. It's been destroyed." And he points to a bunch of little scraps of paper. Someone has apparently like meticulously torn up this black book. Wow. So Ned, trying to be helpful, asks Brady, "Hey, do you remember any of your material that was in there?" But that causes Brady to go on like this tirade about how comedy is about perfection and how hard it is, and that audiences want to see you fail, and that this is the end of his career. Basically just being like a super big asshole about this whole thing, while Ned's just trying to help him. He's like, he takes this as an opportunity to talk about himself.
I don't feel like any of that is true, what Brady was talking about. It's about perfection.
I don't know.
They want to see me fail. Says who? Like, did they tell you they want to see you fail, or are you just
I mean, it's just like classic, like, narcissistic behavior of being like, I'm up against the world. I'm so important, blah, 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 blah. Like, just making yourself the star of the show, which I guess, like, as a performer, like, that's part of the archetype, but it just is like, you're just like this conceited asshole white man who, like, basically asks people to, like, perpetrate violence against women in your audience. It's just, like, very gross to me. Anyway, so Nancy kind of tries to tell him that she thinks she found a clue in, like, the flyer that she found in the hallway, but Brady interrupts her and says, "Doesn't matter, he knows who did it. It's the same people who've been harassing him about his response to the heckler. They've apparently basically already swatted him, like faked 911 calls coming from his home address, as like
not
a harassment."
Name, though, Brady. I know who did it.
I know.
A vague group of people who might be behind something else. Yeah.
But they've done this before.
Okay, thanks for your help in solving the mystery.
Yeah,
Awesome.
so Nancy is like, "Well, here's the flyer." She shows them the flyer anyway. And Joe, who's also standing there, Joe Archer, who's in the room as well, he says that RHVRA stands for River Heights Victims' Rights Association. He knows that because they have been trying to get in touch with him constantly to try to get him to cancel Brady's show. But then Joe says that he believes in free speech and would never cancel a show because he didn't agree with what was being said. It's just, It's frustrating. These men are frustrating, but Nancy, our girl, speaks up and she says, oh no, she doesn't say this yet. She thinks that inciting violence at a show is much different than just quote unquote voicing an opinion. And she doesn't think Brady or Joe is right about this. So thank you, Nancy, for speaking that in your mind to the reader. Really appreciate it.
And what opinion was he just free speeching all over everyone?
He wasn't.
No, he wasn't. He was just being a jerk.
But this is the platform that people who decide to bully other people stand upon so that they don't receive consequences for their shitty behavior.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Comedy is supposed to offend. No, comedy is supposed to be funny.
Right.
End of story. And you can be funny without being offensive and hateful and insightful.
Well,
There's a difference.
even being offensive in an attempt to make a joke is different than doing what he's doing in this moment.
Of course. Yeah.
Because, it wasn't, if you read what he said, which we can go back and do that later and, talk about all the ways that this is not a joke. It's not a joke. And what he does is basically just lash out at someone and be like, I wish that you got, mugged. Like, that's not...
No.
Anyway, Nancy kind of asked Brady straight up, like, well, why don't you just apologize? Like, the harassment maybe will stop if you tell people that you're sorry for doing what you did. But he says that now that people have been threatening violence towards him online, he's like, these horrible people who have been, harassing me don't get to win. And it's like, dude,
how is that
you're such a fucking hypocrite.
Oh my gosh.
You harass someone and you're winning.
Yeah.
I can't. Anyway.
I know.
Anyway. So Joe says that in response to this, hotel room business, he's going to have to increase security for the show at his venue, which is the Arts Complex, which is where Brady's performing. But Brady is somehow vehemently against this. He even gets into Joe's face about it, and they almost get into this big argument. This is super weird. I don't get it. It's kind of implied that they maybe have some kind of history and just about butting heads or something, but in which we'll learn more about later. But I just don't understand what Brady's deal is here. Why would he not want extra security? You think he would if he felt actually threatened by these people, which he seems to, because he talks about them like a threat. So
yeah, I don't remember the reasoning he gives.
I don't think he gives one, but I guess because he feels is it a manly staturing kind of thing? And I don't need the security. I can take care of myself kind of a thing, or
it's letting them win. They'll see that I'm scared. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Anyway, it's just odd. But Nancy intervenes, of course, because that's what Nancy does. And she says that it's okay. I can find the culprit. Because she doesn't think that the RHVRA, who are trying to contact Joe directly, she doesn't see why they would resort to this kind of tactic if they were trying to contact Joe to get him to stop the show. But she thinks that she can find who's responsible. And then Joe says, okay, if you can prove that this was the action of only one person and find them before 6 p.m. or something, he won't have to get extra security. So this is our mission.
Oh, wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Brady thanks Nancy for taking on his case, and she is like, sure, but let's get one thing straight here. I'm not doing this for you. For the record, I do think that you're in the wrong here. I do think that you should apologize, but the real reason I'm doing this is so that the opening of the Arts Complex can go off without any major publicity issues or anything like that. It's just too important to River Heights, and I'm doing this for the town. Let's get that straight.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So at this point, Nancy realizes they now have 5 hours until Joe's deadline that he's given them. So they start to search Brady's room. They decide to all take a corner of the room, and they're going to search it and kind of report back to each other if they find anything. Unfortunately, they don't have a lot of luck. They are able to gather up all the ripped up notebook, the piece of paper from the ripped up notebook, and Ned starts trying to like put them back together. He decides that he is basically like a jigsaw puzzle, and so no problem, right? He's really good at jigsaw puzzles and can put this back together. I don't know. I just feel like they just needed to get Ned out of the way. And so she's like, let's give him this little project while I do the real sleuthing here.
They even go so far as to be like, we do jigsaw puzzles in my family all the time. We do like 10,000 piece ones over Christmas, and they're so hard. I can do this easy.
Oh, yeah. It's all blue. We do ones that are solid color with no outlines.
Okay, Ned. All
sure.
right.
Well, have fun with that. You and Brady work on your puzzle, and Nancy's going to do the real sleuthing here. But so she's looking through everything. They don't find anything, and something reminds her to look under the bed because no one had checked under the bed yet. So she does, and she finds a blazer button, like a fancy gold button with an embossed anchor on it. Very unique item here. So she decides this may or may not be a clue. Brady says it does not belong to him, so she pockets it. And they decide that they're going to go investigate the RHVRA while Ned and Brady stay in the room to work on their jigsaw puzzle. Okay, so Nancy calls Bess and George, who tell her that they will meet her at Joe's office where the RHVRA is sitting in, and they'll try to talk to some of the people there. But as she's heading out of the hotel room and into the elevator, she sees a maid, and she gets an idea that she's going to try to ask about this button. And she tries to say, "Oh, somebody. I just checked into this room with my dad, and somebody left this button on the floor. Maybe you could help me figure out who was in this room last, and I could try to return it to them." And the maid is like acting really weird about this and almost gets irritated with Nancy, and it's just like, stop trying to scam me into a free room. I know about this. I know about people like y'all. You'll try to like scam for free rooms all the time by saying the room wasn't clean enough or something. I cleaned the rooms on this floor myself, so I know that button was not there. And also, the maid reveals that this room or this hallway was just renovated, like just completed the renovation. So the guests that are staying in these rooms right now are the first people to stay there since the renovation. So it's not possible that it could be, just whoever had happened to stay in the room before Brady left it on the floor. Whoever broke into the room left this button. We can pretty surely determine here. Okay, so small success there. Nancy heads over to the arts building to meet Bess and George. She notes that it's this beautiful modern building, brand new construction, and everything looks gorgeous. So they go in and they decide to mingle amongst the protesters and keep an eye out. Bess, with all of her fashion knowledge, has been put on the duty of looking for someone who might wear preppy enough clothes to have that kind of like nautical style that might call for an anchor, in your outfit.
Yeah.
So Bess is looking for that, and they decide that they are going to pretend that they are producers for Ned Talks, trying to get they say that they're interviewing Brady, but they're also trying to get like the other side of the story. So they're there to ask protesters about their opinions on things. So they have this premise that they're doing like a preliminary interview just to see what the kind of consensus is right now and who might be a good person to interview from this group. So they get to this sit-in, and one of the people there asks like, "Hey, are you guys from Erica Vega's class?" And they're like, "No, what class? We found out about this online." And they're like, "Oh, Erica Vega is this professor that does this politics of arts class, and she is just, she's amazing. She's this wonderful professor who knows so much about this. She's actually the one that suggested this sit-in because this is so relevant to what's going on in this class." All right, cool. We also hear the sound of a typewriter through the door in Joe's office. And Nancy remembers from something that Carson had told her, right, that he can't get used to can't get used to modern day computer keyboards because he dislikes technology so much and dislikes learning new things about technology. This book was published in 2019.
So bizarre. I'm sorry, what person in 2019 can't use a keyboard.
So he can't. So he uses a typewriter in 2019.
This man worked in San Francisco at a fancy arts thing. He used a typewriter there. You're telling me the people there didn't send emails? How did he get this job?
I get that maybe he's just really pretentious and thinks that it's better for writing or something, but you would also know how to use a keyboard in addition, too. It's not like he's just like, I can't do it. The keys are too quiet when I push them. How
does he communicate with me? I just don't understand. Like, you're sitting in your office. What are you typing? What are you typing on your typewriter that's related to your job? Anything that you have to write, like, that goes out to people is either going to be digitally communicated or you're going to print it out and it's going to be some kind of, like, flyer or so. But even you wouldn't be doing that as the director of this arts complex. What are you typing?
It's weird, right?
What are you typing?
It's really weird.
I for sure thought this was going to come back in a way of like, the Y on this page is typed so strangely. Who could have done it? We must find the typewriter and compare it like they do in the original Nancy Drew ones. But no, it's just a weird quirk that he has.
Nope, just
what the heck? I also for sure thought that this must have been like some kind of reference to him being like Jim Archer from Old Clock. But I couldn't understand why.
Yeah.
I was just like, what is going on with this? Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No, it's very strange, but it's also kind of funny because he's got this secretary that's kind of out in the hallway, and the protesters are like, so when can we meet with them? And she's like, sorry, he's not in. And you just hear in the background, like, ding, ding, ding.
Also,
okay.
This poor friggin' secretary, I bet you 100% what he's doing is he's typing emails in there on his typewriter, and then he sends them to his secretary to send for him. Imagine.
Oh my gosh, probably.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Men. Jesus.
Amazing. So.
It's just so laughable. It's just so funny.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Well, okay, so so they're in the like, I guess, lobby area of his office, and they're in this room with the protesters, and they announce, Nancy Bess and George announced, like, okay, we're gonna start like prepping for these interviews. So make yourself orderly so we can come talk to everybody. So Nancy talks to two women named Jennifer and Corinne, who say that they are exercising their right to free speech just like Brady, and they don't think that someone who asks a crowd of 200 people to mug a woman in the parking lot should get to benefit from that type of career and be paid to continue to tell these types of jokes, or jokes if you can call them that.
Fair.
Yeah, very fair. Corinne also tells us that she was mugged a couple months ago, actually, and that's why she feels so strongly about this, because she's like, I've been through this. I know how horrible it is. It's not something to make light of, and it's really wrong that he's doing this. Again, Joe has been ignoring the protesters and refuses to meet with them, and Nancy's when talking to these women, she's like, the show is at 7:00 tonight. What is your plan B if this protest doesn't succeed? Like, what are y'all going to do? And the women just kind of like give each other looks. They just kind of stare at each other, and, it's obvious they want to say something else. And they're like, nope, no plan B. That's it. This is all that we are going to do. This is the only thing we have planned. Don't worry. And Nancy's like, all right, sure, whatever. But at this point, a woman who they mention her name is Tammy, comes into the hallway, excitedly brandishing these petitions that are clearly part of some larger piece of this plan that they're not talking about. She does happen to be wearing very preppy clothes. In fact, Beth says that, those pants that she's wearing could be part of a suit, like a pantsuit set, meaning that the blazer that this button could be from matches those pants that she's wearing. So Nancy, in all her subtlety, goes up and is like, hey, I love your outfit. And she's like, oh, thanks. And she's like, I've been looking for a blazer, and I really want a blazer that has gold buttons with anchors on it. Do you know where I could buy something like that? Do you have any specific shops where you know of that sell gold buttons on blazers?
How does she solve any mystery? How does she solve a single mystery with subtlety like this, Kori? It's unreal. Unbelievable.
And Tammy just gives her this look and is like, what? No, I'm busy right now.
You weird girl.
I'm clearly in the middle of something. Don't come try to ask me where I bought everything I've ever worn. Like, what are you talking about? Oh my gosh, it's awesome. That's a great scene. I loved it.
It's very funny.
Okay, so since Tammy's arrival, the protesters get really excited and they're all kind of clamored around Tammy now, and they're now ignoring Nancy and Bess and George, and she tries to like interject with some questions, but it's not getting through at this point. Everyone's too focused on what Tammy's doing, so they decide to leave. Also in the building of this art complex, they have a bunch of classrooms where they have, art classes going on and like lecture style classes. So they decide that they're going to go down the hall and check out the professor, Erica Vega, who happens to be teaching like right now. On the way to the classroom, Nancy mentions to Bess that they had seen a poster for this old masters exhibit that is going to be shown here at the arts complex. I think it's already being shown, or like the exhibit is about to start soon.
Mm-hmm.
But within the collection that they're going to be showing is this painting that rarely ever gets shown called the Zebra Finch. And yeah, I know, pretty. We can't come up with anything original. We just have to rip off.
I just don't understand why they just can't call them by the real name. Why can't you be like the goldfinch is going to be here? It's an art piece. Like, you can talk about it.
Right.
It's like, I'm confused.
Yeah.
Because clearly in this universe, the old masters exist. So why can't you? And you mentioned certain ones by name. I think Bess does. So it's just like, why can't you
why doesn't
say the name of the painting that you're actually referencing?
I don't know. There must be some reason, and I'm just not aware of it.
Maybe.
Well, yeah. So this zebra finch rarely gets seen. Bess actually explains to us that there's a private owner that owns this painting, and they rarely ever let it get shown at museums. So the fact that it's going to be in this exhibit has Bess very excited about this. So it's going to be a wonderful show, apparently. But at this point, we slip back into the class, like into the back of the classroom where Erica Vega is teaching, and she is actually just finishing up her class right now. She's giving a speech about why and how people should hold artists accountable through protesting and boycotting. The class ends, and one of the students asks, like, hey, are you going to be at the show tonight? Like, at the protest for the show tonight, I mean. And Erica's like, no, I've got other plans tonight, but I will be there with you in spirit. So, go ahead and get that protest. Y'all are doing the right thing. Nancy goes up to her, and Bess is actually like, hey, can I, do you mind if I take the lead on this one? And Nancy's like, oh, Bess, go ahead. Yeah. So Bess goes up and is like, hi, Professor Vega, I'm such a big fan of yours. That article that you wrote recently about the zebra finch was so interesting. I loved it. And Erica's like, oh, somebody has actually read one of my articles. I never would expect people to know that I wrote that. And so she's really impressed. But she's carrying like a rolling suitcase with her in the classroom. And she's like, I don't have time to talk right now because I have somewhere I have to be. And they're like, oh, are you going to the airport? And she's like, no, I have a meeting, but I have to get there like right now. I have to leave. And Nancy's like, okay, bye. But wait, before you go, we're podcast producers and we really want to interview one of your students. Do you know of any that would be good at describing what the goal is with these protests and everything? And Erica's like, oh, easy answer, Tammy. She's my best student by far. She would be great. Bye. And she runs away. So afterward, they meet back up with Ned, who's taking a break from helping Brady with his puzzle, or his book, his jigsaw puzzle. And they all decide that they are going to go have a quick lunch break. Ned actually, while helping Brady put the book back together, he got him to answer some of the podcast questions anyway. So he was just recording the entire time. So they actually ended up getting an interview out of him, which is good. Nancy's like, hey, my house is closest. Let's go over there. She calls Hannah ahead of time, and there's sandwiches waiting for them when they arrive. Just the way they like them. This was a really cute
precious
scene.
It was very cute.
And Ned had the crust cut off, and Bess had cheddar instead of Swiss.
Because he's a baby.
Yeah.
Sorry. Man-child. I like the crust of my sandwiches cut off. Sorry, I can't.
Oh, goodness. But yes, thank you, Hannah, for customizing our sandwich order. So they start eating, and we learn Carson is also home. He actually has really bad allergies. He says they're allergies. His assistant is insistent. His assistant is insistent that he is sick and sent him home for the day. And he's like, "No, it's just allergies." But he's home now, sneezing all over the place. And he asks, "Hey, how's it going with Brady and Joe? And how are my old buddies doing?" Basically, and they have a talk about what Brady did, and Carson tells everyone, I think Brady's just sensitive, and he was just lashing out because he's sensitive. Um, no, he was being a bully. So, gosh, what is it that he says about this exactly? I can't remember.
He does say that he's sensitive, but he also, like, criticizes him and says that, no, what he did is not good. Like, he shouldn't have responded that way, and that, only jokes that punch up, quote unquote, are, good ways to use comedy to make a point. So, like, what he was doing was not, he doesn't condone it, but he was just slightly excusing his behavior.
A little bit. We do have a good, like, almost teaching moment.
Right.
It's a little
Daddy
weird
Carson.
because that's weird because they're friends, sort of, or they were friends in college, and so he gives them a little bit more slack than maybe he could have. But they kind of talk about cancel culture a little bit and how like, it's it's not okay to be doing this. And then Nancy's like, something about free speech. Nancy's like, well, doesn't he have free speech to say anything? It's like, well, that's so the government doesn't arrest you, not so that the
I didn't realize they
complex
talked about
that. Did they? I feel like there was some comment that, like, oh, well, he has free speech, doesn't he? Well, it's like, well, the private company that owns the art complex has the right to, cancel your show for being a violence inciting bully, and that wouldn't violate your free speech because it's not violating your rights.
Oh, Ned. Of course it comes from Ned. So
Ned says
is
that
the
part?
one who
Okay.
says, don't you think his job as a stand-up comedian is to push boundaries? And Carson says, well, tell me what boundary Brady was pushing.
And then Ned's like, can't come up with anything. He's like, oh, huh.
And Bess is the one who says he wasn't pushing any boundary, he was being a bully.
Yes, there we go.
Hell yeah,
That's
Bess.
what happened.
Hell yeah, Bess.
Thank you, Bess. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then so they have that little conversation, and then Carson asks, like, hey, was Joe happy to see what was going down with Brady? Like, was he happy about the break-in? And Nancy and her friends are like, no, what are you talking about? Why would he be happy? And Carson's like, oh, well, when we were in college, they were always like feuding at school. Like, it was always this big thing between them. There was actually this open mic night thing that they had opened up for like alumni to come to. It was just supposed to be this big event. And Brady and Joe were supposed to do comedy sets at this open mic night. And they get up there, and Brady did his show, and then Joe got up there and did an almost identical show. Like, supposedly what happened is Joe is claiming that Brady stole his jokes, like somehow knew the jokes that he was gonna tell beforehand, and then because his set was first, it made it look like Joe stole the jokes, but Joe says that it's actually the other way around. So apparently, like, over 75% of the jokes were exactly the same, and Joe actually got booed off the stage, and Brady was like, no, it's total coincidence. Like, we're both in college. We're both frat guys. Like, it makes sense that we would have similar material about being frat guys in college. Okay,
I believe it's
sure.
0%.
Yeah.
I just, what I don't understand about this situation, though, is how in anyone's right mind, you have an open mic night. You're sitting there in the audience. You have your stuff ready to go. You sit there, you watch one of your friends perform 75% of the same material that you have, and you still decide to get up on that stage?
I would just leave. I'd be like, I'm not doing my set now. Yeah,
just
this is
chalk it up to a bad job. You don't get up and do that. You know what I mean? That's insanity.
Yeah.
Sorry, my voice got so high-pitched.
No, it's okay. But apparently this was... this is not the only thing Brady did in college. Apparently he once got caught cheating at a track and field event. Like, he was in a race and took a shortcut or something and got caught. So, yeah, so he was doing this shady stuff, and then obviously it caused a rift between Joe and Brady. Also, at this open mic night, this alumni named Jack Murray, who is this big talent agent, was there in the audience, and he saw Brady perform, thought Brady had amazing potential, and signed him onto his agency. So Brady's career basically started like that night. And then obviously Joe never had the comedy career, even though that's kind of what he wanted. Yeah. So Carson doesn't think that even if Joe had been the first one to perform his own jokes, that Joe even would have gotten signed, because they kind of asked him that, and Carson's like, no, Brady actually, he had genuine like star power. He was really good on stage. His timing was all impeccable. He was genuinely very talented at telling these jokes, and Joe was just kind of awkward on stage, and his timing was never right. He just, like, the jokes didn't land, even though they were the same jokes. It was actually at this point that Brady dropped out of school to focus on his comedy career. I don't know if I said it earlier, but they were roommates as well. They lived together.
And they were roommates.
Yeah. And so for the rest of, like, between the time when, that comedy night and then when he actually dropped out of school, like, Brady was like sleeping on the couch or something because they were so furious with each other. And it's just like this whole thing. But yeah, so Nancy gets this look in her eye, and Carson can like clearly tell what she's thinking, because he's like, Nancy, no, it couldn't have been Joe that did this. It was a long time ago. Don't you dare suspect Joe in this, because I can tell you right now, it was definitely not him. Don't even think about it, young lady. And she's like, no, Dad, that's not what I was thinking. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Yeah, so when Carson was saying all this, he's like, I didn't tell you this so that you would think that he should be a suspect. I just told you because, it might be relevant to you, because Joe now probably just thought it was funny that the room was broken into because of karma or whatever. Not that he did it, not that he would have enjoyed it because he's the culprit or whatever. That's all. Leave it at that. So he leaves to go back to work, and Nancy's like, okay, well, guys, obviously we're suspecting Joe first, right? Like, this is
so funny.
Yeah,
that
so
was
they're like,
probably
all right, well,
the best scene in the book for me is this
Nancy,
moment,
no.
this whole conversation with Carson being like, Nancy, he's not a suspect. He leaves, and Nancy like, okay, so he's suspect number one.
Excellent.
Too funny. So Ned brings up that Joe was with Brady while they were eating lunch, and when they had found Brady's room, right, when it was trashed. So Nancy then just kind of like kicks herself, because she realizes that this whole time she's been like assuming stuff. She's been assuming, one, that this case was about Brady's recent viral video, when it could have been about this decades-long grudge. Like, she shouldn't have assumed a motive, even though it seemed like, that was one. And two, they also assumed that his room was broken into and trashed while he was at lunch, but it could have happened any time prior to that. And she neglected to even get a timeline from Brady of that day, so they don't know, like, when a suspect could have been there, right? Bess reassures her, telling her that she has at least 3 solid suspects and 2 whole hours to solve the case, so that's plenty of time. So they decide to go meet with Brady and, nail down a timeline for that day to try to figure out how to move forward. They find him in his hotel room, curled up on the middle of his bed, crying about how his career is ruined, and he's now relying on a teenage detective to save it.
Well, you're welcome, Brady. Go solve it yourself if you're so distraught at the idea.
Honestly. I can't. Okay. And also, it's the lack of decisive action for me that's so frustrating. Yeah. First of all, Ned just spent, like, I don't know, an hour or whatever with you trying to reconstruct your little notebook with you. Try to use material from your notebook. 2, if you feel like you can't do it, cancel the freaking show. Cancel the show. Right. Like, I'm sorry, don't sit there crying about it. Figure out a game plan, dude. I can't with this. And then, like, blaming the fact that the reason why his or, like, evidence of his life being in shambles is because Nancy's investigating. It's like, you should thank your lucky stars that there is one person in this world willing to help you out in this moment, because you're acting like a little baby, a little asshole. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. So, but this moment is great too, because Bess, like, steps in and gives him, like, tough love and, like, tells him to stop crying, go wash your face, come out and talk about this. It's so funny. And then he does pull himself together based on a teenage girl helping him pull himself together. Thank you, Bess. Honestly, just the the imagery there is really just like top tier.
Yeah.
Of like a
excellent.
grown man crying in the bed, and then a teenage girl coming and being like, "You're acting like a child. Get up and help us." It's just like, I can't. It's just really great. It's just really great. I just really appreciate it.
Be ashamed of yourself that you would put all that responsibility on a teenage girl, that she should be the one to have to like pull you together.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Great.
Mm-hmm. So Nancy asks him about what he did that day, and he tells us that he left his room around 11 and went for a walk, and then he met Joe for lunch at noon. He didn't have a chance to go back to his room in between. So Ned and Nancy found his room at 1, so that's a 2-hour window between 11 and 1 p.m. for his room to have been trashed. Nancy asks him about the feud with Joe that Carson mentioned, and Brady yells at her, saying, "That was a long time ago. Joe didn't ever steal my jokes. It was a misunderstanding," or I didn't ever steal Joe's jokes. It was a misunderstanding, and we mended our fences a few years ago anyway. I had a show in San Francisco when we met, and bygones, basically. Nancy like, "Okay, sorry, just asking, because I'm trying to solve the case here, dude." And then they decide that the next best course of action is to try to look at the security footage for the lobby to see who was here between 11 and 1 to, trash his room. This is also a really great scene, though, I have to say. Ned, they're all like standing in the hotel room, and Ned asks Nancy, do you want to do a distract and delay? And like Bess and George and Nancy, they all seem to know exactly what to do and what's going on right here. And Brady's just kind of like, "Oh, what? What?" He's just, it's iconic.
Get with the program, Brady.
So Nancy and George go downstairs. George sets herself up right outside the door to the employee-only area, and Nancy calls the hotel. Luckily, it's her friend Pete who answers. Nancy asks him, "How many security people do you have working right now?" And he says, "We only have 2. We're short-staffed right now because of the renovation." And Nancy asks him if he'll patch her through to security, but when he does, making it seem like she's staying in Brady's room so that she can pretend like something's going on from Brady's room. And he's confused, but he agrees. And Nancy then puts on an excellent performance, I have to say, claiming that there has been a stolen diamond ring, and yells at the officers saying, "I need at least 2 officers to come to this room right now to help me sort this out." And then 2 men leave the employees only door, and Nancy and George sneak right into the security office. George cues up the security footage, and they start scanning it for familiar faces. They see Brady leave for his walk, and then they see Joe arrive, and they see Joe go up the elevator to Brady's floor. Okay, well, maybe he's just, going to see if he can meet Brady for lunch, right? Then they also see Tammy arrives and does the same thing. Joe comes back down the elevator, but he was up there for 20 minutes. Plenty of time to trash the room, and Tammy is still up there. Nancy also notices a suspicious guy in a baseball cap and sunglasses. But before they can discover much else, there's a pounding on the security office door, and someone's shouting "Hey, who locked this door?" So Nancy and George have to make a break for the window and barely escape the security office in time, and they have to hide under the windowsill, back against the windowsill, as someone comes into the room and looks out to see if anybody is running away out the window. And even they're they stand there, and sweat from the security officer's face drips down onto Nancy.
It's gross. Sorry.
This is very close to the mouse moment from Gray Fox Inn. I don't know that I would be able to stay silent.
No, I don't know. I don't know which one's worse, honestly. That's,
I have goosebumps because I'm so grossed out right now from that.
Yucky.
It is a narrow escape, but they manage to get back into the lobby unseen and blend in with other guests. At this point, George's phone goes off because she has a notification set up for whenever he tweets. And Brady has just tweeted that, quote unquote, "protesters are trash and deserve to be trash like his room was." Okay, Great. So this, of course, makes more people angry online and, firm in their beliefs that he is, in fact, inciting violence against people. George makes a comment that, hey, maybe Brady is self-sabotaging, on purpose because he's, nervous. He has stage fright. Very interesting theory, George. And, maybe the reason why he's doing this is so that he can get out of, contracts that he signed with venues without, being at fault, if he can prove that there's, a significant security risk to himself by, doing this. Interesting. Very interesting.
That would be clever.
Mm-hmm. So they get back up to the room, and George, straight up asks him, hey, why would you send that a text? What were you doing? Or that tweet? Why would you tweet that? And Brady is, confused. It's what are you talking about? The only tweet I sent today was, a harmless one advertising the show tonight. Interesting. So George looks at the tweet again and sees that it's actually being sent from a spoof account, tricking people into thinking that it's Brady, right?
Hold on.
Interesting. Okay.
If George had a notification set up on her phone so that his account would notify her anytime that he tweeted, why was a fake account notifying her?
I think I might have misspoken. I think what she had was a Google alert or something, or some kind of other kind of alert that of news about Brady. So maybe it wasn't a notification from tweeting from his account as it was
interesting.
I think that was what it was, but
that's possible. I think I read it that way as well, though. That it was. I set up a notification that if his account tweets, that it will send me a notice. Because that's what
normal people would do,
right?
But George is supposed to be a techie person or whatever. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, that makes sense, but I read it as it being the other way too, though. So I don't. That's kind of weird.
Yeah. So this is interesting because it seems like the person who tweeted that knew about Brady's room being trashed. So is the person who's running the spoof account, is that the person who trashed Brady's room, right? That's what we're thinking at this point. Brady says, hey, well, this rules out Joe because Joe doesn't know anything about technology. Remember, the typewriter situation? So he definitely doesn't even know what Twitter is.
Awesome. That's his alibi. All of that just for this sort of alibi.
Oh, this is insane to me. I don't know. Whatever. So Nancy now thinks, well, for sure, since we've ruled out Joe, we know it's Tammy. It's got to be Tammy. Right? She's the only other person in the security footage that we saw. This kills me. Okay. We have to talk about this later. We'll talk about this later because this makes me so frustrated.
Yeah.
So now that they quote unquote know that it's Tammy, they just have to prove it. So they decide to go back to Joe's office because it seems like that's where Tammy is. Nancy, Ned, Bess, and George all run over there and they see Tammy in the corner on her phone. Nancy notices that the phone that she happens to have is the same kind as George's phone. She convinces George to give Nancy her phone, which apparently George has named her phone Chester, which I thought that was just hilarious. Also, how lucky are you that she just happened to have the same kind of phone as one of y'all? That is, beyond belief luck.
Well, I don't know. I guess if it's...
But if it has a phone case that looks different, if there's so many things that, I just don't... You couldn't hand me someone else's phone, even if it had the same case as my phone. And I would be like, oh yeah, that's my phone. I would know instantly. This is not mine. The button's not missing on the side of it. It doesn't have a scratch in the corner,
Yeah, that's true. That's true. There's only so many types of smartphones these days that it could have, she just had an iPhone and George had an iPhone. So, but you're right. There would be a lot of distinguishing. Yeah.
It's 2019. Anyway. It's not like this is 2005 and it's like a Nokia brick. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, so, Nancy accidentally on purpose, knocks into Tammy, knocking her phone to the ground and, causing Bess's purse, which she also borrowed, to, dump everywhere and things go flying, all these, everything's on the ground or whatever. It's a little awkward, but Nancy is able to switch George's phone for Tammy's phone. They do a little switcheroo. So she quickly brings the phone to George, who starts to look through it. But of course, it is not long until Tammy notices that she doesn't have her phone. She has someone else's phone. So she comes over to Nancy to ask for it back, assuming that Nancy accidentally switched it. Nancy stalls, pretending to dig through the purse, and tells her that oh, Brady didn't really send that tweet that you all retweeted. Tammy does seem genuine in her surprise and disappointment when Nancy shows her that the account is fake. And then George subtly gives the phone back to Nancy, who pretends to find it in the purse and then gives it back to Tammy. They trade phones again. Once Tammy leaves, George tells her that she didn't see any evidence that Tammy was responsible for the faked Twitter account. And so it's kind of like, oh, bummer. And they kind of leave the office kind of dejectedly. But once they get outside, they are surrounded by people and find that the protest has grown considerably. And at this point, Joe shows up and shouts to Nancy, hey, have you found the culprit yet? Nancy tells him no. And of course, he is kind of upset about this. And he says, oh, I'm going to have to get extra security now just to handle this protest. And also he tells us that they're removing the old masters from the exhibit tonight. So this is very tense. There's no way they can delay moving the old masters any later because the owner of the zebrafinch is so worried or whatever, and it would be a disaster for the art center if this exhibit flopped, right? Or anything went wrong with this exhibit. So we have an hour left to go before Joe's deadline, I guess, and Nancy is more determined than ever to get to the bottom of things. This is silly to me. Because clearly, things have already escalated, and Joe just said he's going to have to get extra security anyway. So I don't understand. We still have this deadline? Also, why can't we have extra security? Well, should we not be having that anyway if you're moving very valuable paintings tonight and there's a protest? This has nothing to do with Brady anymore. You know what I mean? I don't get it.
Was he threatening to cancel it as well, or was it just extra security?
No, just extra security.
It was just that. Okay. It wasn't even a...
Okay. I understand that we have to, find some way to raise the stakes, and we do that by putting, our sleuth on a deadline. I get it. But this is the flimsiest excuse for a deadline that I've ever seen. Yeah. The deadline should be Brady's show, not about a deadline that Joe set about extra security. The deadline should be Brady's show, and it should be the pressure should be coming from Brady about, needing to perform. But also, it shouldn't be about the sabotage. You're right, it should be Joe threatening to cancel the show or something but
no, we don't do any of that.
No.
We don't do any of that.
We don't do any of that.
Yeah.
I don't get it, but okay.
Yeah. Wonderful. Okay, chapter 10, right? Let's see here. All right, so we've got this hour deadline to solve this mystery. So what better to do right now than take a break and go get some coffee? We explained that George works at the nearby coffee cabin, and they're closed right now, but she has the key, and they are allowed to go in there and help themselves to coffee as long as they, one, pay for it, and two, clean up everything afterwards, so it's all good, and lock up when they leave. So this is what they decide to do. They go get their coffee, and while they're having their coffee, they decide to kind of analyze the Twitter account, the fake Twitter account that had been sending the violent stuff pretending to be Brady. George mentioned something about trying reverse social engineering, so they should try to reverse social engineer who owns the Twitter feed by reading the tweets. We're just literally analyzing them. We're just reading them and analyzing them.
Looking for context clues, all we're doing.
Right. And they're like, do you guys know what reverse social engineering is? And George has to explain this whole technical thing, and it's
but it's
that's also not relevant.
It's also not even really accurate. George doesn't explain it in an accurate way. We should talk about that later too, because it's silly. It's goofy.
It is. They just wanted to be like, George is the tech expert, so we're going to give her a term that she knows.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they decide to divvy up all the tweets that have ever been sent by this account and, take turns reading through them. So they do this, and they realize that whoever has this account tweets a lot about art, and they mentioned a flooding situation that had happened in River Heights last April. So we can deduce, 1, they live in River Heights, and 2, they like art. Great.
Good job, everybody. Go team.
Finally, we are getting to the real meat and potatoes of this mystery.
Also, though, like, can we just talk about the fact that, like, when someone sets up a spoof account, they're using their own account, like their existing Twitter account, and they change their name. They don't just set up a new Twitter account.
You would think.
Who doesn't set up a new Twitter account?
I don't know.
If you're doing something nefarious, you know what I mean?
Right. You would think this account would have been created like the day of the heckling incident.
Yeah. Or like
All
maybe
right.
it's been like trying to do that for a while, and so maybe there's like a few fake Brady tweets, but like it's their own Twitter account. That's wild. What an idiot.
So I guess it's very convenient for Nancy, though, because it helps them figure out, well, not figure it out, but guess the identity of this Twitter account holder. So Nancy's like, oh, art. Maybe we should go talk to Erica Vega again. All right. So they rush back over to the art center. On the way over there, though, Nancy now wonders if maybe it's possible that Brady wasn't the center of all this anyway. Like, his heckling and bullying wasn't the real motive behind this. Maybe this is actually about the art center, and maybe there's this like massive multi-million-dollar art installation that's about to
We haven't gotten there
open.
yet. It's not quite. Nancy's not quite thinking about that yet. She's
not thinking about it yet.
Jobs. But
she's like, oh, it could be about the art center. Maybe what the art center has going on is a lot more of a lucrative situation than Brady's one-time show in this building. Or maybe someone is jealous that Joe got the job for the director of the art center position and wants to sabotage him. All right.
Okay.
Also a valid theory. So because the front of the building is still so clogged with protesters, they decide to go around the back, and there's a van out back, kind of in the loading dock area. And they're like, oh, I wonder if those are, if the van's there waiting to unload the paintings for the Old Masters exhibit. Very possible. So they go inside, they go through the back door, and they realize the back door is unlocked. Strange.
Where?
Maybe they're just lucky. Maybe they just had perfect timing. Who knows? But they walk in and they see that the baseball cap guy from the hotel security footage that we'd noticed earlier, he's walking around and he's wearing a blazer with gold buttons. And Nancy's like, oh, could there be anchors on those buttons? So she runs and flags him down. And she sees that there's a button missing from his blazer. And she's like, oh, hey, there's a button missing from your blazer. And he's like, okay. And he's like, so what? And she's like, well, I was just wondering if maybe you dropped it somewhere. Like, maybe this is your missing button, and like pulls it out of her pocket and shows him. So he takes off running, and Nancy, of course, starts running after him. And then Ned is like right behind her, shouting after her. So it's this whole thing. And this chase scene leads downstairs into what appears to be a very full storage area. And Nancy's confused. She's like, the art center has only been open like a month or so now. Like, this is so recent. Like, what could be in storage here? Like, why is there just so much stuff everywhere? There's no way they could have already accumulated this much storage stuff in the time since they've been opened. So, okay, weird. But Nancy suddenly hears a noise behind her. And then before she can like turn around to look, something hits her in the back of the head and she blacks out.
Oh, of course she does.
Yes. This is also kind of disappointing because we don't get the, resolution that we were hoping for. But she wakes up and Ned is kind of standing over her and she's looking at him and he's like, don't worry, we caught the guy after you were knocked out. He's actually right over there. And we pan to Bess and George guarding this man tied to a chair.
It's funny.
And then Nancy wakes up and he says that he's the one they've been looking for. And he seems like not eager, but he's like too willing to like admit to everything. So he seems to know that they're investigating Brady's harassment situation, and he hands George his phone and tells her, look, on my phone, there's proof right there. You can see the Twitter account is logged in and see the whole Twitter thread there. He says his name is Lewis Flynn, and that his sister was actually mugged and had ended up in the hospital recently, and he's of course furious with what Brady has said. Because it resonates so closely with him. And then Nancy's like, did you destroy the notebook? Was that you in the hotel room? And he just shrugs and is like, I don't remember, but like if it was in the room, then probably I tore it up because I was just like destroying so many things I don't remember. And Nancy's like, well, that's kind of weird because like to sit there and like individually tear up pages of many page notebook, it would take you some time. You would know that you're doing it. It would be intentional. But she's like, well, I mean, that is kind of weird, but we have a confession, we have proof, we've got our culprit here tied up, so mystery solved, right? So Ned calls Joe to come down, and he's very happy and he's impressed with Nancy. But he's shocked to find out that it's Lewis. Lewis is actually a painting instructor at the art center, and he had like previously stopped working, or his art had stopped selling, and so he'd been looking for a job for a while. And he was very happy to get a job at the art center, and so he was just kind of like, "Oh, I'm really surprised that it's you that would do this." But the police come and arrest him and cart him away. And Bess is like, all right, Nancy, time to go to the hospital. And Nancy's like, no, I'll just take an aspirin. We're going to go watch Brady's show tonight, obviously. But she still just has this feeling that somehow, some way, this isn't over yet. She just feels like that was too easy. I don't know. But they get upstairs, they get to their seats, and the show starts. And in a shocking turn of events, right away, Brady comes out and he apologizes. He says, it took all this drama and all the protests and everything for me to realize that what I said was a mistake, but it was, and I'm really sorry. And then he starts, getting into his jokes and starts his set and everything seems to be going well, even though he doesn't have his trusty notebook anymore. But then the fire alarms go off and everyone has to evacuate.
Ooh.
Yeah. Okay. So they're outside, and Nancy can tell that Joe is disappointed. She turns to her friends and it's just like, guys, I just don't buy it. I don't think Lewis did this. And then George looks up this Lewis guy on the internet, and apparently he's this well-known painter, and he did a series on having been an only child. And so obviously he's lying about his sister being mugged if he's like famously an only child. I don't know. That's very convenient. But suddenly Nancy starts to connect all the dots and realizes all of this has been a distraction. Everything from the Brady incident to the protests, it has all been a distraction. She remembers seeing the van outside, and they speculated that this was the van holding all the paintings for the exhibit, and Joe saying something about, oh, we're going to have to pull the security from the painting delivery to help with the protest crowd control situation. And so she realizes obviously someone is trying to steal these paintings and use the Brady chaos to distract everyone. So they rush around back and find that the back door to the art complex is open again, and we see that the zebra finch is indeed missing. So they split up, and Ned and Nancy follow, there's like tracks on the ground from like wheeled suitcase tracks. So they follow the tracks, and they find Erica Vega is like already hanging. Isn't it the same open window that Nancy had to jump out of earlier, or is it?
I don't know. No, that was at the hotel.
Oh, right. Okay, so she's just like halfway hanging out of an open window, like she'd made it like halfway out, and her legs are just dangling. Yeah. So they catch her. The police open the door and yell everyone to freeze, and this gives Erica time to get out of the window. Like she's able to get away now, and Nancy's like, no, you got the wrong people. Like you got to go get Erica. It's not us. And the cops are like, oh yes, ma'am, Nancy Drew, whatever you say. And they take her word for it. They run after Erica. Finally, they catch up to her in the parking lot, and they do detain her. And they find the zebra finch in her suitcase, safe and sound. All right. Well, Joe is completely stunned at this development and asks Erica, why would you do this? And she's like, I have student loans,
This is the motive, everyone. This is the motive.
I never thought that even with my advanced degree, I would have to teach at a community art class in River Heights, of all places. And also, Brady truly is awful, so he kind of does deserve this. So...
Okay.
Then it's Joe's turn to confess here. He admits that actually, okay, so he was supposed to meet Brady for lunch, and Brady had gone for the walk right before lunch, and then when he comes back, it's immediately time to go to lunch. Well, Joe had actually gone to the hotel while Brady was out on his walk, intending to meet up with him for lunch, and finds that he's not in his hotel room. And he notices, hey, this room has already been trashed, but he doesn't say anything or do anything about it. So he'd already known at lunch that the room was trash, but he thought that this was just karma getting back at Brady, and so he's like, that guy got what he deserved, and then just left it. Okay, sure.
So this is a plot hole.
Yeah.
Did you notice that this is a plot hole?
Isn't this weird?
Well, because but keep going and we'll talk about it later, because you're about to say,
Okay, so Nancy is getting ready to go home, and Ned brings up her injured head, and Carson tells her, he brings it up in front of Carson, and Carson, who has now shown up to the event, is like, all right, we're going to go to the urgent care right this minute, because clearly you're concussed. Let's go. So the next day we learn that Nancy actually did not have a concussion. She's been checked out by the doctor. She's totally fine now. She and Ned go to see Brady off. He's going to head to his next show in the next town. So they're just going to go say goodbye. So they're talking to him, and Tammy walks up. She comes up and apologizes because she says that she's the one who destroyed his notebook with all his jokes in it. So apparently she also went up to his room while he was gone, found the door open, and then saw that the notebook was just sitting there. And she realized what it was. And so it just kind of, made her furious. And that's when she destroyed it.
Mm-hmm.
And Brady says, actually, you know what? Thank you. You know what? You were actually right. The notes were harmful. They were destructive. And I'm glad that now that, that this happened, I'm kind of forced to write new material, and I'm going to have this reinvention of myself as a comedian.
Okay,
and
Brady.
I'm going to be good from now on. I promise. And then they shake hands, and then Brady leaves. And then Ned and Nancy decide that they are going to go edit his podcast episode before, the excitement around Brady's stuff dies down, so they can get excitement out of posting it or whatever. And so they're going to post it, and that's pretty much it. They leave to go do that. The end.
Jeez Louise. Okay, so
plot hole.
Yes. So who trashed the room? I know we're supposed to think that it is baseball cap guy Lewis, but they didn't see him until after Joe and Tammy went upstairs. Let me just go back to make sure, but what chapter did they look at the video footage? 7. So they're watching the footage. For the most part, it was just footage of people walking to or from the reception desk or the elevators. There's Joe, I said, pointing at the upper right corner. Slow it down. George slows it down. He's heading towards the elevators. They talk about how that's weird. They see what floor he goes to. They check to see how long he stays up there. And then George says, wait, there's Tammy. And she's heading toward the elevators too. Who's that? I asked George, pointing to a man who had entered behind Tammy. He was wearing a suit with a plain black baseball cap, and I thought I could make out the edge of sunglasses underneath the bill. So he comes in after Tammy.
Almost with Tammy, it sounds like. That's weird.
Maybe. But they only have time to see him come in, and then they have to leave because security comes in. Yeah, so I'm sure it's just a coincidence. George says, look, there's Joe getting out of the elevator. So they see them come in. They see Tammy. They see Joe go upstairs. Then they see Tammy come in, and they see baseball cap guy come in. Then they see Tammy go up the elevator. Then they see Joe coming down the elevator. And then George says, and Tammy's still up there. this is Nancy saying, my eye drifted back to the man in the baseball cap, but before I could watch him any further, my phone buzzed. So they don't even see him go upstairs. He comes in after Tammy, and he doesn't go upstairs.
Interesting.
So why? Who did it?
Erica that trashed the room prior to anyone else arriving, which it would almost have to be, but then why is he there at all?
They were watching the video footage from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. That's the time. They saw Brady leave.
Oh.
So who did it? Because they would have recognized Erica at that point. They'd already met her.
Right. Interesting.
But yet they're saying that both Joe and Tammy, when they went up there, saw that his room was trashed already.
Interesting. Yeah. So unless he somehow...
Unless he came in before, they didn't notice him come in before, and then he comes back?
Right.
Afterwards.
Why would he come back?
Why would he come back?
He wouldn't.
Plot
hole. You're right.
Plot hole!
Big plot hole.
Editing snafu. Oh, well. Also, okay, can I just say, too, that all of this could have been solved and avoided by the Arts Center having adequate security from the get-go?
Right.
This had nothing to do with Brady. This had nothing to do with the room sabotage. They're just trying to... Wait, but why would they even...
Yeah.
Okay, this is my question, too. Why would they even trash Brady's room? What does that have to do with Arts Center security?
Because surely... if he was scared enough...
Then they would get more security, which is what you don't want.
Right. Or that he would just cancel the show.
Who trashed Brady's room?
What if he had been scared and been like, yeah, Joe, let's cancel it. And then they canceled it. And then all the security is now devoted to the art show. And now that's the opposite of what you want.
Right.
And also, what was the idea behind using Brady at all? Obviously, the goal here was to get the security focused on something else so that they could have the opportunity to steal this art, sure. But how did they plan this out so far in advance that they knew Brady would act ridiculous at a previous show, and then that would so happen to be the show right before the show where he's going to be here? That relies on a lot happening.
I'm guessing that was just kismet. But
okay.
It does seem really convenient. And I mean, definitely this Professor Vega and this Lewis guy don't seem exactly like they're professional art thieves, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
It definitely seems like a bit of a crime of opportunity. But
maybe this was all planned after all the drama started.
Yeah, it must have been. But it does just seem like really ridiculous, just vaguely ridiculous. Why would you even think of this? You have student loans, and so you're gonna steal the goldfinch, the zebra finch?
Yeah.
Okay, art professor. How is an art professor, as someone who went to art school, be like, I'm gonna steal a painting. I'm gonna steal one of the most famous paintings in the world to pay back my student loans? You would never. First of all, because as a professor, you would understand how impossible it would be to fence that kind of object.
Right.
Do you have criminal contacts? Do you know who are you selling this to to sell this fabulously so famous painting? You have to have a buyer.
How are you going to explain the money, too? All of a sudden, you can just afford to pay off your student loans, and you don't think the IRS is going to blink twice at that?
As soon as Interpol comes over and starts looking at people's finances for people who work in this building, because that is the very first thing they're going to do. They're going to see, Professor Alexa Vega just had, I don't know, $20 million deposited into her account. Probably her.
Or even just she immediately paid off her student loans as soon as this extremely important thing went missing. Okay. Not suspicious at all. That's of course what they're gonna do. Okay.
It's tenuous. It's tenuous.
I'm liking it less the more we talk about the plot holes.
Me too. I still think it had better moments in now that I'm remembering, particularly the scene with Carson and they're all at home and Hannah's made them sandwiches. That's a really good scene that I think highlights a lot of their personalities with like Carson being, Daddy Carson and giving us all a lesson. And he even like talks about how like when Brady drops out of like school to go do his comedy career, and he says, which none of you will ever do. You will all get degrees. And they're all like, yes, sir. And
you will go to school and you will stay there.
And Ned makes some like, crappy like crack question or whatever that Carson just absolutely shoots to the ground. It's just like, and then Bess, is the heart of the group and says, no, he's just being a bully. It's just excellent. This is an excellent
We did get some
scene.
Great Carson moments, great Bess moments in this. Even some good George moments, which was nice. So
George was on it. George was on the case. You know what I mean?
I definitely
and coming
like
up
that
with like really great like theories of motive, as well as like the only one really driving the plot as far as like being able to look at security footage, going through the Twitter feed, getting on what's her name's Tammy's phone. Like George is the only one like actually getting the clues here. So yeah, George really, earned it here. Yeah, but overall, it's like the plot is just doesn't make much sense.
Right.
Yeah, but
that's a shame.
It also has one of my like absolutely least favorite like what seems to be, I guess, for lack of a better word, just like tropes of this very particular series, the Nancy Drew Diaries series, which is where they make Nancy an idiot.
Oh, yeah.
They turn her into such a stupid person, and it irritates the fire out of me. How, like, literally she just talks about, like, they're at home, and she talks about how, she, like, smacks herself in the head because she's been assuming all this stuff about the case. She assumed the motive. She didn't even think to look at, like, a timeline of events for the day or whatever. But then she just, like, literally just forgets about that. And is like, well, if it's not Joe, it must be Tammy. It could literally be anybody else, Nancy. It could literally be any other person that exists that you just don't know about. Like, there could be 1,000 other motives that you're not aware of. What do you mean it has to be Tammy? Or you, like, it's just such... I know Nancy is single-minded, but this goes past the point of single-mindedness to, like, stupidity, in just my opinion. I don't buy it. I don't like it.
Definitely the worst carryover from the Girl Detective series that they kept for whatever reason. That and her being, I'm so clumsy that I would fall and get a concussion. But not a concussion because I'm fine, because I'm Nancy Drew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I understand that it's supposed to be a kid's book, right? And so, like, to a certain extent, we have to really kind of, like, try to simplify it so that maybe, like, kids can follow along more easily. But I think what that does is I think it's an unnecessary dumbing down, and it underestimates the intelligence of a lot of kids, I think, if we can't put the same kind of complexity in these books that we would expect. And like a lot of the point of like books like this is to kind of teach in a way to teach kids how to like logic and read these kinds of books and situations. And if you have Nancy set up to like just discount stuff, I think you lose out on such an opportunity for Nancy to explain on, why it could be anyone.
Absolutely.
It's my pet peeve. It's pet peeve.
Yeah. Doesn't make it as enjoyable. Definitely.
No. Well. Okay. I want to talk about the social engineering aspect because that was so funny to me. Okay. So this is George's explanation of social engineering. Have you heard of social engineering? None of us have. So she says, well, social engineering is when instead of using computer programs to hack into someone's account, people use their knowledge about that person to guess their password. That is not the definition of social engineering.
No, it's not.
Social engineering is when you treat people like machines, right? And you understand that people in general, like as a society, will act in a certain way. And it's hacking the system of like social interaction. So you're expecting like people, so like when you go into a workplace or something and you're trying to use social engineering to get in there and do something nefarious, you are using social engineering to try to make people trust you to let you in, right? It has nothing to do with hacking into people's passwords.
Right.
Like, what a
I mean, it could be used to, like, get into someone's programs, but that's not the main point here.
No.
It's making predictions about behaviors rather than, like, the computer will process it this way. It's these people will act these ways because that's what we expect them to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and then she says that, well, a famous example is a few years ago when a man in Florida broke into the email accounts of a lot of celebrities, but he wasn't a computer programmer or anything. Could just say hacker, but okay. He was just a really big fan. He read everything he could about the various famous people and learned everything he could, what street they grew up on, their pets' names, and so forth, and used that to guess their passwords. He tried to argue that he hadn't done anything wrong. He claimed what he did wasn't actually hacking since he'd used only public information.
Okay, that's not the same thing.
That's not social engineering. That's just good guesswork. Right. And also, and then why do you have to use that to talk about, like, looking through this Twitter feed? Like, you could cut out an entire page from this book of just George's explanation of that, and it just, like, one, it's the incorrect explanation, and two, that's also not what you're doing. You're not doing that of what you were talking about with that guy, and you're not doing social engineering. So what is this whole explanation for?
Just to make George sounds like a tech expert.
But I feel like she would sound more like a tech expert if she just went, oh, it kind of sounds like social engineering. And we could just leave it at that. We don't have to explain it. We don't have to talk about it. We don't have to come up with this weird story that did not happen. You know what I mean?
Or she could just be like, guys, let's read the tweets and see if there's any, like, themes here or, like, anything that jumps out at us. And that's all it was. That's all they did.
I feel like George did not need this moment. George had plenty of really great moments throughout this book. And I feel like this moment should have come from Nancy and should have had nothing to do with social engineering.
Absolutely.
Just been like, what have we not done? How can we learn? I know, let's look through the Twitter feed.
Right.
That's very much a Nancy Drew kind of solution, I feel like. And it just felt like Nancy was too dumb and she didn't have anything.
Right.
What?
Oh, well.
Mad.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to talk about for this book, Kori?
I've got just a couple little things. One, we learned that when Carson was in college, he had an apparently dynamite Elvis impression that he liked to do. And apparently would do it all the time and still believes himself to be spot on impression.
Love it. So
Love
funny.
that one. Let's see here. Oh, a little bit more hints to the Ned-Nancy timeline. At the very start of the book, Nancy explains that she and Ned have known each other since they were little and have been dating for a few years now.
Mm-hmm.
So,
we also learn that Ned, I mean, we've known this kind of through other books, but Ned is home from school. We talk about that.
Okay, yeah.
That's a good one. And so, yeah. Like, because Hannah gives him the cookies to take back with him to school.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Good point. And then my last thing was just that at some point I made a note wondering whether Brady was actually on cocaine for this entire story or not. But I don't remember what exactly prompted that. It's just everything about his personality in this is just like, this man is doing a lot of drugs.
Some drug problems because the way that he turns on a dime.
Yeah.
Like, his emotions change incredibly quickly. Like, he
very
goes...
erratic.
Very erratic behavior. He gets very angry very quickly. Then he's randomly, like, sobbing, on a bed alone. Like, yeah. And then he seems to, like, completely change his personality at the end of the book. But it doesn't feel particular... I mean, to me, it didn't feel particularly genuine. It felt kind of like... well, now I can reinvent myself kind of a thing.
Performative.
It just felt very like, okay, well, that's how people kind of justify, these kind of turns. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, It was just, that's a really great observation, Kori.
It's like, what is he doing? Because he's flitting from thing to thing so quickly, and his energy is weird. So
it's weird energy. It's weird energy. Yeah. And I was kind of attributing that to just like, I think the commentary they're trying to make maybe about like male comedians or just like, male stars in general, I think, which is also an interesting thing to talk about, but very, very astute that you should attribute it to maybe some substance abuse.
Which, I mean, wouldn't be uncommon in the stand-up comedy circle, I feel
Certainly,
like.
So. Yeah.
That's right. I mean, it doesn't change any outcome of the story. Yeah. It's just like, this man is acting very interestingly. So.
I did feel like throughout this book we had very interesting gender dynamics.
Yes.
Like the whole, they really kind of put us in two different camps here. They really have like team boy and team girl here. They have like the team men, podcaster, Joe, Carson, Ned, and they even kind of all like group together and kind of really like stand up for each other and just have a lot like to do with each other. They talk about similar things like thematically, and then we very much have like team girl, which is like the protesters, mostly women, are there. The, female professor. And then we even have Nancy, Bess, and George doing most of the investigating around this and kind of interacting with those protesters, whereas, Ned, Brady, Joe do not interact with those protesters at all. And so we're very much in like two split camps. And I thought that was really interesting. And the way that like Nancy and Bess both interact with, and even George a little bit interact with Brady, and they are like they very much like kind of butt heads, like when they interact, like Brady will get really aggro or whatever, and then Nancy's just like has to like really be really staunch and like defensive and like kind of stand up, right? And Bess has to like get really like aggro at him kind of when she tries to get him to snap out of his like crying or whatever, and George has to like not like attack him, but like be really firm when she asks about like, why would you tweet that, like, and so we really do have these like butting heads between like our men and our women, and even like with Carson and Nancy do that with like the whole Joe's not a suspect thing. Joe kind of butts heads with Nancy a little bit with like, he feels like he's not getting what he wants from her, as far as like this investigation thing. So I just found that super interesting. And it does kind of seem like the position that they take is that like the men here don't have it together.
and the young teenage girls have to be the ones to pick up the slack.
Right. And it's a very astute observation, I think, especially when you think about like the protesting angle and like how, young women are calling these, older white men comedian, to the mat kind of, and being like, hey, don't do that. And have to kind of stand up for themselves and the world and be, be the ones to hold accountability for men. It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Not in a bad way. I like it. I'm here for it. It's just an interesting dynamic that they put in here that I thought was notable.
That's a very good point.
Notable. Yeah.
That's all I got, though. How about you?
Let me see. I just thought it was super cute that Bess is like in love with art. Like that feels like a new aspect of her personality that like we hadn't really explored before. Bess is like really into the old masters. Yeah, that's so cool. And also into architecture. They talk about that too, because
with the new building and
So Bess is into art and architecture, and I thought that was a really nice, kind of compliment to her personality.
Very fitting.
But Nancy says that like she's more of a traditionalist. And that she didn't like the building. She didn't like the new modern building. I thought that was funny. Let's see. Oh, Hannah's in love with Ned. That's a comment that I made.
Yeah, maybe a little bit.
I think Hannah loves Ned more than Nancy loves Ned. Just because she made the cookies for him. I thought that was just funny. Let's see. George's boss has the same faith in her that Nancy's boss has, or that the police have in Nancy.
Oh, yeah.
Because they let her use the coffee shop whenever she wants. That's funny. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Yeah. Yeah, so an interesting one. Bit of a complicated one, I think, overall.
Indeed, yeah.
Yeah.
Flashlight score?
Has some pros, has some cons. Yeah, this is so hard. No, I just don't. It's so hard. It's so hard to rank books. I mean, I know I'm not ranking books, but it feels that way when I score other things on the same scale.
Yeah.
2.75. 2.5? 2.5 or 2.75. I can't decide.
That's a good rating. I was going to go a little bit lower, between 2 and 2.5, maybe.
Okay, then let's settle at 2.5, maybe.
2.5 sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm trying to compare it to the last one we did, A Nancy Drew Christmas, and I'm just like, you're right. It's less memorable, but
it's more cohesive.
Right. So, but I think I did give both parts of that like a 2 and a 3, or maybe like a 2.5 and a 3.5 or something. But yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, very hard, because like I think about it, and like there are things that I really liked about this book. There are lots of really funny moments, really cute moments. It's in River Heights, which I love. I just didn't like the plot. I didn't like the fact that it centers around like a community, because I just don't care. A part of the reason why I read the Nancy Drew books, and part of the reason why I read a lot of books in general, is just for escapism purpose.
Sure.
And I appreciate the way that these books stand up and put themselves in a time and place and talk about social issues, because a lot of the times we don't get that, and it's really disappointing when we don't have that. But sometimes I just
you don't want to deal with it right now. That's not what you read in this book.
Yeah. But so that's kind of I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with that. So I feel very what's the word? Not ambiguous, but where you either lean one way. Ambivalent. I feel really ambivalent about that. So yeah.
And again, it was just so forgettable. The plot was, at least. I mean, there was definitely some funny parts, definitely some parts I appreciated, but it's just, we just went over the summary, and I'm still like, what was it? And it's just, the room got trashed, and then there was a painting.
I would pay so much, I would pay $0 actually, but I wish so badly that this book was post art theft. Like somebody really did steal the zebrafinch, and then Nancy has to go in and investigate the stolen zebrafinch.
That would be great.
Wouldn't
That's what this story should have been, especially with that cover. The title, I guess, is an appropriate title this time. Finally, we have one that makes sense for the...
Or like, it could have even been like, maybe we start with the Brady stuff, but then he immediately performs that night. You know, we're not really investigating the sabotage, but maybe that comes into play like afterwards, after the zebrafinch is stolen while he's performing.
There we go. Yes, that would have been much better.
And then Brady can be a suspect, kind of. You know,
that would have been good. Yeah. And not just maybe he's doing it to himself. Suspect. Yeah, he's sabotaging his own show. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Oh well. Yeah. Coulda, shoulda, woulda.
Yeah.
They need to hire us, Kori. I mean,
they really do.
I would just like to be a beta reader. You know what I mean? For some of these books, and be like, did you think that maybe we didn't want to read about this?
Maybe we're sick of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh well. On to the next, I say.
Wow, speaking of the next.
Yeah. What's next, Kori?
Very exciting special episode planned for number 50. Yeah, we are actually going to do another board games episode. We're going to do a part 2 of our one from what was that, like episode 25, was it?
No way. That would be too convenient. Hold on. I'm looking right now.
I feel like we did that one about this same time last year because...
It was a little sooner.
Yeah.
Let's
see. It was
see.
very cold when we did it.
Oh, 20. It was 20.
Oh, okay. Episode 20.
Yeah, episode 20. Okay.
So we're doing a part 2 of episode 20. Wow, that's crazy. It feels so long ago. But yeah, so we're going to do a few different board games this time, but we won't tell you specifically which board games. Obviously, they're going to be Nancy Drew related, but different ones than what we did last time. So hopefully you'll join us for that one, and hopefully it'll be a good one.
Yes, I'm very, very excited.
Me too. Yes.
So we'll see you then, regular Drews.
Yes. And it's extra exciting because we'll get to see each other for this
one.
I know.
So
we got to be in person to play them.
Yes. Yeah. Yay.
And we might have some more special guest stars again because it's hard to play board games with just 2 people. So we're going to have to recruit some friends for this. But
alrighty, regular Drews. We'll see ya.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Regular Nancy Drew. Email us at regularnancydrew@gmail.com.
If you like this episode, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe.
You can also follow us on Instagram at Regular Nancy Drew and Twitter at RegularND.
You can also support us on Patreon. Patrons at the $3 level vote on upcoming episode topics and get exclusive access to our Scoop Sesh series.
And all patrons receive early access to each episode as well as weekly bonus content.
And to all you regular Drews out there, thanks for listening.